Okay, welcome everybody to this month's McGill Palliative Care National Ground Rounds Lecture. This is the Honourable Hartland de Montarville Molson Lecture sponsored by the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. I'm going to skip over some of the usual things that I say because you've heard them many times. And also I just want to say that we are bending to the political realities of the moment, particularly across the southern border, and not having our speaker with us in person, but we are delighted to have her, and I will introduce her in a moment. Before providing the important accreditation-related information for this lecture and the National Grand Rounds program as a series, we wish to acknowledge the land on which this lecture is given.
Bienvenue à tous. The members of this committee and their relevant declarations include Dr. Justin Sanders, who has relationships with La Maison Saint-Raphaël, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, and Connections, Inc., and who has received honoraria and grants in recent years from the Oklahoma University of Health Sciences, the Oregon Health Sciences University, and Pancreatic Cancer Canada. Dr. Arjuri Simikalis, who discloses a relationship with and grants from the Shriners Hospital for Children. Dr. Olivia Nguyen, who acknowledges an association with la Société québécoise des médecins de soins palliatifs and a research subvention from la chaire de la famille Blanchard pour l'enseignement de la recherche en soins palliatifs. Dr. Naomi Goloff, who reports relationship with the Canadian Society of Palliative Medicine and grants from the Kindred Foundation and l'Association québécoise de soins palliatifs. Social worker Zelda Freitas, who indicates grants and relationship with the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence and with Nova Montreal, and Doctors Janelle Walsh, Aurel Schuker, and myself, who have no conflict of interest to disclose. This series includes sponsorship from the Cedars Cancer Foundation, the Hope and Cope Wellness Center, the Jewish General Hospital Foundation, the Montreal General Hospital Foundation, the Montreal Neurological Institute, the MUHC Foundation, Pallium Canada, St. Mary's Hospital Foundation, the Montreal Institute for Palliative Care, a branch of the Teresa de l'Art Palliative Care Residence, and the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. Thanks to the Department of Family Medicine at McGill University for their in-kind support, and a special thank you to the sponsor of today's lecture, Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. Here we present a strategy to mitigate potential bias. The overall program learning objectives are as follows: to review innovative approaches for the implementation of palliative care in different settings, to assess strategies to address the most important challenges in palliative care today, and to appraise the latest research in the field of palliative care.
Okay, so thank you everybody for your attendance, both virtual and in person today. Our speaker is Dr. Lori Weiner. Dr. Weiner is an expert in psychosocial care for pediatric, adolescent, and young adult patients with critical illness. As a clinician and behavioral scientist, Dr. Weiner is interested in understanding the psychosocial experiences and needs of youth living with cancer or other serious illnesses. As co-director of the Behavioral Health Core and head of the Psychosocial Support and Research Program, she has developed a robust clinical and research program that has focused on critical clinical issues. Dr. Weiner led the team that developed the first evidence-based psychosocial standards of care for children with cancer and their family members. We are so delighted to have you. Please welcome Dr. Lori Weiner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanders, for that generous introduction. And let me try to open up my slides here. Can you see them? Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, beautiful. I so wish that I was there with all of you today, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity. So for people who haven't been to the NIH, this is our campus and our hospitals up front, but really the heart is the Children's Inn at the NIH, where our children and family are housed. And there you see on the left is Zilly, who has more Instagram friends than probably anyone that you know. I have no conflicts of interest and no financial conflicts to disclose, and the views expressed in this presentation are my own. So a little bit about what I'm going to cover today. And again, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to review the evolution of communication practices and how they have transformed how we communicate to children over the decades. And to take that to be able to look at strategies that I have found helpful and others have found helpful to engaging children with various developmental stages in these meaningful discussions. And from what we learned, we led to the creation of a comprehensive adolescent and young adult planning guide called Voicing My Choices. And finally, I'll share some communication tools, clinical considerations, and best practices. So let's start by looking at some of the history. Before the 1970s, there was tremendous secrecy surrounding a cancer diagnosis. In fact, researchers at the time reported that until the age of 10, fatally ill children were not aware of what was happening to them and didn't experience any anxiety. In fact, they said that revealing the cancer diagnosis to a child was considered inhumane. And this widely held belief shaped medical practice for decades, creating a culture of silence. Things began to change in the 1970s with some seminal reports. And the first was Eugenia Wechter, who studied 64 children between the ages of 6 and 10. She divided them into 4 groups and matched with socio-demographic factors and found that the anxiety scores of the children with the serious or fatal illnesses were twice as high as the scores of other hospitalized children. And in projective testing like this, they discuss loneliness and separation and death much more frequently in their fantasy stories. And then came the work of Dr. Myra Blueband Langner, who, from her observations of hospitalized children with leukemia, children between the ages of 3 and 9, she showed how the children have come to know that they are dying, how and why they attempt to conceal this from their parents and staff, and how the adults in turn try to conceal from the children their awareness of the child's impending death. And she coined this ritual of mutual pretense. By the mid-1970s, there was a shift. It was no longer an issue of whether to tell a child or not, but rather how to tell, when to tell, and who should do the telling. And a beautiful review by John Spinetta looked at that the real awareness that a child as young as the age of 6 has when they're living with this serious illness. And this pivotal reframing marked a fundamental change in pediatric oncology communication, so that the focus moved from debating whether children should be informed to developing thoughtful, compassionate approaches to sharing critical information in age-appropriate and supportive ways. By the 1980s, there were wonderful medical advances, and as more children survived cancer, families who had lived through the experience became powerful advocates for honest and early communication. And their voices reinforced emerging clinical evidence that transparency, rather than secrecy, served children's best interests. But what about prognosis? What did children with limited experience in living understand about progressing illness or death? And this is really very deeply complex. For me, it was listening to their fears, fear of being alone. Children express a deep anxiety about separation, being isolated during frightening medical experiences, fear of being forgotten, especially after long hospitalizations, by their family or their friends. And then, of course, if they weren't to survive, and worry for their parents. When they're observing the stress that their parents are experiencing, to them gave them a sense that maybe things are more serious than perhaps they're being told. And then there are the myths. Your Canadian brilliant Dr. Adam Rappaport writes and speaks about this so beautifully, the myths about discussing prognostic information with children. For example, if a child isn't talking about what's happening to their cancer or body, neither should we. That's not true. If we tell them, they will think about it all the time. Well, anyone who has children knows that they will be in the moment so much better than we could be in the moment. That we need to protect children from emotional pain, which of course is not at all possible. If it's possible to avoid any of the D words or the cancer words or the other difficult words, that doesn't work either. And that some children do not wish to know the truth. Well, in reality, many children don't want to know all the specifics of their treatment regimen, but they also don't want to be lied to. They need to be able to trust those around us. And so Dr. Rappaport speaks about what happens when we do provide children with these opportunities to talk, to work through their feelings, to feel less isolated, to trust what adults are telling them, and to learn to trust their own perceptions. So I'm going to focus a little bit on this trust because building trust is essential. It is the foundation of our work with children. Seriously ill children are often in a state of hypervigilance. We see this. They are so adept at reading our nonverbal communication. They see right through falsities, and any forced cheerfulness, constantly minimizing false smiles, just adds to additional stress. Even a fleeting glance at somebody in the room, a slight facial grimace or altered body positions are interpreted quickly by the child that something else is going on. It's almost as if they're reading one set of smoke signals very clearly, but when we say something different, trust is then jeopardized. So what about openings? How do we start these conversations? And there are windows of opportunity. How wide they are, for how long they remain open, really depends on how attuned we are to their cues. So it's not just what they're saying, it's how they say it, when and to whom they say it. And sometimes it's not with using words. It's the art of listening. So children may be very, very direct and ask questions right out front, or they may drop hints. They may cautiously test to be able to see if this is a safe conversation, or if this is going to be a hot one, it's only going to be very emotional, or this is going to be a time for something honest. They sometimes fire test rockets in the face of a legitimate question, such as, am I dying? Which in itself is infinitely powerful communication opening. But what lies behind this question? And Jan Aldrich writes beautifully about this. And she says to respond as if you are rounding a foggy bend in the road, cautious but with your eyes and heart wide open. I have found certain questions can promote communication, so I'll just share some of those with you. I may ask, when you close your eyes at night, I wonder about some of the things that are on your mind. And what do I hear? Questions like, well, will it hurt to die? Will I die while I'm sleeping? I don't think I had time to do anything that makes my family proud. I really wanted to grow up and be whatever that may be, how much I would miss my family. Another question I would ask is, but what would make leaving this world less scary? And I'll hear things like having my family with me, having cuddles or their favorite pet to be able to be with me, not having any pain, knowing that my mom will not be crying forever. And then I'll ask, what would you like your loved ones to know? And you'll hear things like for parents, like, just don't forget me or visit me. And if you're going to come to my graveside, maybe I could hear you. So just talk to me, just love each other. Siblings, I hear a lot about, I'm sorry that mom and dad spent so much time with me, and I may not have always been really nice to you, but I still love you. Or it's okay if you move into my room. And if you have children one day, name your child for me. For grandparents, what would you want them to know? Just take care of my mom, my dad. Don't stop baking those chocolate chip cookies, applesauce, whatever their favorite foods were. And thank you for always loving me. For friends, also, don't forget me. Do things to remember me. Be nice to each other. What about your pets? Well, I'm so sorry I won't be here to cuddle with, but it's okay if you start sleeping in so-and-so's room. And I leave you this one question because I think this has probably been the most helpful question for me to be able to share with families down the road. If you were looking down at your loved ones in 10 years from now, what would you like to see? What would you not like to see? So the lessons learned is that not to walk into a room or have these conversations talking about all medical jargon. It doesn't work. I may enter with slime balls, cozy socks, be prepared for whatever emotions await. I did this morning and with the patient in our ICU. Or I may just say, it's so good to see you. Or if I haven't seen him in a while, I've just really missed you or your smile. And then I ask permission. Is it okay if we hang out together for a little bit? And I don't stop by saying, tell me what's worrying you. I usually stop by just saying, I saw your parent in the hall. They look really concerned. What do you think is worrying them the most? And they may ask us somebody else that may be worrying them the most. And then I'll ask, what about you? And what else is worrying you right now? Important children, like adults, can cry one moment and laugh the next, even when talking about really serious issues, including dying. So for optimizing communication, any conversation that includes youth should be held at a developmental level, their developmental level, with adult conversations held separately if needed. That's okay. And the clinicians and the parents should arrive at a shared understanding of the level and type of information that is appropriate, not just based on age. And despite their desire for autonomy, children and even adolescents generally want their parents to be involved in important decisions, but really assess how involved the parents want to be in decision making. There's a really important study that found that parents who held more active roles in decision making than they wished had higher odds of decisional regret. So that's an important conversation to have. And that one approach will not be appropriate for all. Things you know well, just to consider culture, religion, history of loss for sure. And always to pay attention to some of the spiritual pain and suffering, even if they don't call it religion or spirituality. Because when children face serious illness, they struggle. They really do struggle to find meaning. And they do consider existential questions such as, why me? And if they believed in God, like, where is God in all of this? And how could this happen? And perhaps I'm just too young to die. They may question their belief systems or belief systems they were told, or they may hear my friends and family pray for me, but I'm not getting better. Why? Or they may have anger towards God or others, like, why did God let me have a body that doesn't work right? It's just not fair. They may desire more of a stronger relationship with God. Like, where is God when I need God the most? And there's feelings of guilt that are really important that we address. Like, I didn't pray enough. That's why. I can't speak enough about how important it is to partner with our chaplaincy colleagues. They help so much, especially when I have pictures like this. And I do a lot, you'll see, with artwork. So when somebody's talking to me about heaven, I'll bring a paper and pencils or colored pencils or markers and say, show me what heaven is like. And for this particular drawing, you see a soul catcher at the bottom. But on that right, that elevator was the elevator. And I knew I needed some help there. And in this picture of heaven, or somebody who just lost so many friends over time into the same disease, this young man spent so much time just drawing that fence, that wall, and that was God sitting on the fence. Again, chaplaincy helped tremendously. And so we need to be able to also communicate beyond words. This is an 8-year-old with a brain tumor who left this drawing for me. Just really didn't speak very much at all. I am an acorn, I'm scared of squirrels, and I am not scared of dying because I'll grow back up again. So what about working with a nonverbal child? Well, of course, you want to use a calm voice and eye contact, art supplies, do a lot with puppets, or anyone who's been in my office. Sand trays are also great. If anyone has training in that, you learn so much. Touch, of course, Take 5 is a popular one, and reading books. So just talk a little bit about bibliotherapy with two fabulous colleagues, Marina Coley and Dr. Megan Weaver. We looked to be able to find any books that would be appropriate for a child who may not survive their own illness. There's so much out there in terms of loss and grief and bereavement, but not if you, the child themselves, could die. And so we looked and read through many, many books, but we only found 5 that were appropriate for a child who may die, and the best was in French, which would work for you, but didn't work for us. And so we did write, Dr. Megan Weaver and myself wrote the book, The Gift of Gerbert's Feathers. And it's a story about a very courageous gosling who loved his family and friends, but knew that things were different for him. And people weren't talking to him about what was happening with his feathers falling out and his watery poop. And he had to find a way to be able to help them to talk to him. So I'm not going to tell you any more about what happened and how he did that, but there is free to download notes to parents and kids, reading guide and a feathers coloring sheet, and you could watch the YouTube anytime that you want. But what we did do is to be able to write with other colleagues, Dr. Brian Penarola and our staff members here, in how I approached to how I could use bibliotherapy in caring for children with oncologic and hematologic conditions. So feel free to get that paper if you're interested. So now I'm just going to transition to the AYA population, which we work with mostly here now. There's many adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 34 years of age that die from cancer each year, which is where the National Cancer Institute. And the adolescents and young adults have very specific preferences. They know what they want and what's most important to them, but they view a lack of information given to them as a major barrier. There are very few formal advanced care planning programs or resources that are available, and the ones that are for adolescents and young adults have been informed by adult experiences. And in a very important paper by Jenny Mack and colleagues, 1/4 of adolescents and young adults express regret about treatment decisions. I'm always concerned about caregiver decisional regret. This is a classic paper from 2004 in the New England Journal of Medicine with Swedish parents who lost a child to cancer. And none of the 147 parents who talked with their child about death regretted it, where 27% who did not talk with their child about death regretted not having done so. But there you go. You had 73% that didn't regret it. But when we looked at this issue, we found very similar findings. We looked at 118 parents who lost a child to cancer who was ages 6 months to 25 years. And we found 72% of the parents endorsed regret and 25% endorsed unfinished business, both associated with distress and prolonged grief symptoms. The most common regrets were about treatment decisions. And the most common unfinished business was not having had a discussion with their child about death. Please note, I am not suggesting that having a conversation about death is a regret prevention recipe. We can never eliminate grief. But this data, and from what I was seeing in my clinical practice, mostly with artwork from preteens and teens, led me to be able to think we needed to find a different way to be able to give this voice. Pictures like this with using mandala, and right in the center is what, when will I die, or will I live long enough to go to college, or when will I start getting sick again? Or pictures like this from someone who is back and forth from the ICU, who named this Where Do I Belong? So decided to be able to start with a therapeutic workbook, which we called This Is My World. And every time a child came to my office, I said, what would be a good page? And one day I had a pretty precocious 11-year-old who said, I know, we should have my mock will. And I said, tell me about that. And she stood up, put her hands on her hips, and she said, you adults think you're the only one who thinks about who they want to have their stuff? And a mock will it was. And this page became one of the most important pages in this workbook. And why? I can't tell you how many times a family would say to me when their child became seriously ill or died, I don't even know what they would want. And I was able to say, I do. But that's a problem. I shouldn't be the one who knows. But would an advanced care planning tool be helpful? So we have 4 phases of a study to be able to develop an advanced care planning tool to explore whether AYAs would even be interested in a developmentally appropriate tool. We started with 20 participants in focus groups and then added another 20 to critically review what we learned in the focus groups and what was in 5 wishes, if they were helpful, appropriate questions, stressful to contemplate, and what should be added, removed, or taken out, and why. And we found that every participant reported that such a document created by and for people their age would be appropriate. 90% thought it would be helpful for other people their age with their condition, and 95% thought it would be helpful for them. But they were clear about what was missing. Things like where I would want to be when the end of my life is near, or the people I would want to be with me, the clothes I would want to wear, the friends and family I would want to attend my service, or those I would not want to attend my service, music, readings, belongings, as I just mentioned from that precocious 11-year-old, and how I want to be remembered on specific days. Like I want Thanksgiving, which is coming up here soon in America, and their birthday or special holidays, and a place they can be able to put down things that are important, like write a letter. So what was missing with the developmental considerations? And so when we think about another brilliant Canadian, Dr. Turchinoff, came up to design the dignity model, and this is what we were hearing too in this age group. Self-worth, the importance of legacy, continuity of self, having some control, maintaining their identity, having meaning despite being really ill, and how do I get to an acceptance of the life that I have lived? So with that, we took into account the importance of family and peers, and we created a new document called My Thoughts, My Wishes, My Voice. And we opened this study up now to additional participants at Georgetown University, where they critically reviewed every page and the formatting and the colors that they wanted. And we heard over and over and over again the importance, again, of meaning, spiritual thoughts, identity, family, friends, autonomy, legacy as the key developmental issues. So we took all of that, what we know from the literature, what we heard from our phase 1 and phase 2 of the study, and created the document called Voicing My Choices. Voicing My Choices is a place where adolescents and young adults could say what makes them feel supported, a place that they could write down decisions that bring them peace, a place to choose what provides them the most comfort, and a place they could be able to document their thoughts and needs. And then we can design a way that people can introduce the different pages. So like on a page about comfort, just to say when you don't feel well, what tends to bring you the most comfort? Do you like the room dark? Do you like to tend to want to listen to music? Here's a page you could be able to express that. Or how I'd like to be supported. Like some people say they could feel alone, even when they are in a room with a lot of people. Have you ever felt that way? And when you're not feeling well and need some support, who do you like to have with you? Family and friends, this is such an important and popular page in this document that people sometimes they worry more about their family than what's happening with them. And asking if there's anyone in their family who's having a particularly hard time and what you worry about that person. Or is there someone you want to say something to but not sure how? Like someone who's done something really cool and meaningful, or something that you might want to say you're sorry for. About medical decision making. How does medical decision for your medical needs happen now? Are you comfortable with the way that decisions are currently being made? Has it ever been hard to voice what you might want or not want, or have your opinion heard? And in terms of life support, here's a place that you could share your thoughts that you might have about how much mechanical support for machines you might like provided if, for example, your body was not able to work on its own. At the end of 2012, Voicing My Choices came out through Aging with Dignity. We signed a material transfer agreement, and just really surprised by how many people were requesting this document. There's at this point over 75,000 copies distributed in 42 countries. It even showed up on the front page of the Sunday New York Times. And people were just like, Lori, you must be so happy to be able to see this out there. And on one hand, yes, but on the other hand, no, because we never studied voicing my choices in the same way we studied the other iterations of this document. And we were having requests from people in their 30s that didn't want a document that was created for people 65 and older. I didn't know, does it improve communication? Does it increase or decrease anxiety? What about acceptance of illness? So we opened the third phase of the study to answer those questions. And it was open for people ages 18 to 39, where they completed baseline measures on those domains I just mentioned above, where participants reviewed every page, critically reviewed every page, but this time they completed at least 3 pages. And a month later, we had them complete the measures, but then we interviewed them and we asked them, did you share the document with anyone? And if they did, we asked whom and what that experience was like. And we asked, can we talk to that person and those people? And if they didn't, what were those barriers? And this study was open in 7 different sites. We had 149 participants that reviewed and completed baseline and follow-up measures, and half of them had not previously discussed wishes or preferences with a family member, despite the fact that they had serious illness. But after a month, 65% of those did share their Voicing My Choices pages. The majority, 79%, had not previously discussed their wishes with their healthcare provider, and of those, very few shared what was in their document at follow-up. And why? Well, fairly, they said, I haven't had an opportunity. It was only a month. I'd understand that. But more often, we heard things like this. I think they should raise it with me, not the other way around. We didn't find significant differences with social support or acceptance with illness, but importantly, and I think the most important finding was that anxiety around end-of-life planning decreased significantly between baseline and follow-up. And why is that so important? It's because so many providers say, I don't want to make them anxious. That's why I'm not going to raise this issue. Over 90% reported the items to be helpful, but they definitely recommended some changes in terms of treatment desires. They did not like the way we listed life support payment options. They wanted more inclusion of peers, about social media, fertility, and if they have children of their own. So in 2020, we revised the document. In the current version, for example, we had 3 options on life support if they were close to death. As I mentioned, they did not like that at all. And so they didn't like the way that we listed all kinds of interventions. So they preferred to have a hierarchy for things they could relate to. And then 3 options. For the first, if treatments are available that may cure or improve my disease or disorder. The second, which is what we had originally. And then a third option. But what if I say I want everything done, but I can never get off of life support, to have the option to have their goals of care reassessed. They also wanted not only to be remembered, but to be honored. And they not only wanted to know where they would want to be buried, but if they want to be buried or cremated, but where they would want to be buried or their remains to be. They wanted information about personal, even passwords, or who should be informed of their medical status. If they participated in fertility preservation and unable to use the collected eggs or sperm, what they would like to happen, how they would like their social media accounts to be handled, etc. And again, they want a place to have a voice and write letters, but where do you start? So we provided some prompts that I found to be very helpful clinically. And for those who have children, a page for what they would want for their children if they were seriously ill. So the last phase was really comparing the research. This happened during COVID, and to be able to compare the original. We had 65 participants and in 4 different sites now. And it was really important that we involved many different sites and not the same. And overwhelmingly, you'll see that the participants preferred version 2. And I think this was most useful to hear. That did you find reviewing Voicing My Choices helpful in thinking about your own care? And would you use Voicing My Choices for your own care? And here, over 95% endorse that for both. But maybe just listening to the families, which really is the most instructive for a story like this. Like, thank you so much for this document that coached us through the end and helped make her passing a sweet memory rather than a more traumatic freak out. Or I don't know what I would have done if I had to make these decisions during our extreme grief. But she did it all for me, even though she got to where she couldn't speak, actually had her say. Well, we're having really a lot of excitement now is working with many different cultures. And I'm happy to come back another time and talk about the rigor that takes place. It is not just translation of Voicing My Choices. And you'll see the covers themselves are also very different in the different cultures, not only the content. In terms of future adaptations, the Czech Republic is well on their way, and there's several other countries that I'm working with, including on the bottom. I just bring attention to your wonderful Dr. Perry Tuttleman at the University of Calgary, who's doing some beautiful work already. So we don't want our work going from the lab bench to the park bench. And so I'm just going to give you one example of how we're trying to study and implement using Voicing My Choices and palliative care concept in research, in clinical care, and that is with stem cell transplant. We know the risk of transplant, especially for AYAs, and the barriers that hinder them from having these discussions. So our goal was to assess the feasibility and acceptability of having longitudinal advanced care planning conversations with these the AYA recipients and their caregivers. And we're doing this with 3 conversations, 3 different time points. The first conversation utilizes a modified serious illness conversation guide. What is your understanding now, where you are with your illness and transplant, how much information you would want to have, what are your hopes and worries, what gives you comfort or support, what are your most important goals, and our lead investigator for this study is Dr. Brian Penarola, which I hope is listening right now. And the second conversation, which is the novel part. So the young adult completes several pages of the document for their caregiver, for what they think their caregiver would want. And their caregiver completes the same pages for what they think the patient, the AYA, would want. And then we have them together and we compare. And often we'll hear things like, yeah, you really got me. And other times we'll hear things like, no, what are you thinking? That's absolutely not what I would want. Please don't do that. And then at the third conversation, we review everything with them, and then we give them a document that is very personal to them for what they share throughout the study. And we have a qualitative interview that is conducted by a non-interventionalist for the study, and overwhelmingly heard about reducing decisional regret by having these conversations. And you can see both what we heard from the patient and from the caregiver, and from both the patient and the caregiver. Many feelings about how helpful, what a relief it is to know what they want, and just to feel empowered by being able to feel that you can be able to make decisions that are based on their special needs and wants and desires. This is just something that I thought this group would be interested in. Is we do ask them to rate their most important life goals up front, and again, if follow up in it up front in the baseline, you'll see towards the bottom. The AYA said put to live as long as possible, no matter what, but the caregivers put that right on top. And the numbers are pretty close, so we'll see what happens at the end of the study. But I don't want to just leave that there's just Voicing My Choices. There are so many other advanced care planning tools that you can consider using. The young children, My Wishes, our therapeutic workbook, This Is My World, is now in the 2nd edition. We have pages like a safe place to put down their worries. We kept the mock will. And for legacy, what I want the world to know. Jenga is great with teens and young adults, and you just put different questions you want on there, and you learn so much. And it's great in a group setting as well. The therapeutic game Shop Talk that was created here and is available in many different places right now, and it's free in the United States to be able to ship it there. It identifies coping skills, self-efficacy, views of prognosis, and really importantly, it can be used individually, in family, or group. There are 3 versions for patient, sibling, and parents. It's in English and Spanish, but there is now a version in Italy and another one in the Czech Republic. And then for family communication tools, my absolute favorite was created in Canada, in Alberta. It's called Hear My Voice, where there's 5 different sets of cards, and that the family could be able to go around with each of the sets of cards and a question there. And why I like it so much is because at any point the person can say, stop, or wait a minute, this is really important. I want you to hear this. Or wait, I want to hear what everyone says about this. Or maybe ask me later, I need to give that some more thought. There's a gift of grace now called Hello, which is a conversation game that I really don't recommend for younger teens. Everyone answers the same question, and then if you listen to their response, you can get a chip. So I'm just going to go through some final thoughts because this is something that comes up clinically for me a lot over the years and for people that I mentor, and that is, how do we say goodbye to our patients? We know we help families to be able to have this communication, but it's important for us as well, because we may not have the chance to be able to say a final goodbye in person. What happens? Patients could die unexpectedly or sooner than we thought, or they may be at home or admitted to a hospice or a different hospital. The parents may just say, I'm not comfortable with you having conversations about anything prognostic or definitely about end of life. There could be cultural taboos as well. So we need to always think about the timing. If it's too early to have some conversations, too late, but you're never going to go wrong when you take the child's lead. And you may be saying goodbye more than once in very different ways. That happens. The most important part is that it's a process. By creating a safe path, paving that road for open communication, this can happen. And so words that I found to be helpful is that something, can I just tell you something, especially if they may be transitioning to a different hospital, just how much I love spending time with you and how much I'll miss talking to you, how much I appreciate you trusting me with your thoughts, how much I will miss you, your laugh, your jokes, your wisdom, that I will keep in touch with your family. That's so, so important to them, and that you will never, ever, ever, ever be forgotten. Common questions I get: is it okay to not say a final goodbye? Of course. Can the final goodbye be in the form of a prayer or another medium? Of course it can be. Can you say goodbye when the patient is unresponsive? I sure have. Can you say goodbye silently? I do so a lot. And can you say a final goodbye after the patient dies? Of course you can, and find a way or ritual that works for you. We also have a paper that just came out in Psycho-Oncology, if you think that this could be helpful for you, that's across the lifespan with saying the final goodbye. When some people say goodbye, we say hello, and you may recognize that from a Beatles song. So I end with saying, who is responsible for courageous conversations? And the best answer is a resounding us. And this collective us benefits from early preparation, formal training, and empowered partnership. And I love this model from The Wizard of Oz, that approach, because it takes brains like the scarecrow, courage like the lion, and compassion like the Tin Man to do this work. In summary, listening is the most important way and the most important skill. Watch for indirect communication. Look for those openings. Never underestimate a young person's capacity to understand. They will see through the falsities and they will respond to authenticity. There's no universal script or single phrasing that's going to suit every child or family or situation or mentee. And not every young person is going to want to talk. That's okay. The parents' needs may be greater, and that's where some of your attention may need to be, so they could have those courageous conversations with their child. Leaving a legacy is a human need, and the words we use matter. No matter, recognize their immense weight, because honest, unembellished communication will offer clarity, dignity, and respect. And isn't that the heart of palliative care? And saying goodbye may be the most insightful, meaningful work of all. By the wonderful Maddie Spadanic, palliative care no longer means helping children die well. It means helping children and their families live well. And then, when the time is certain, helping them die gently. There's so many people I need to acknowledge and to be able to thank. And these are just some for the Voicing My Choices work, and all of those who participated in those studies. And to all the children, teens, and young adults and their caregivers who so courageously allowed me to be part of their journey, and to each of you who joined here to listen to this today. Feel free to reach out to me at any point. And those interventions and some of those resources are on our website, and they're listed down below. So thank you. And let me see how I get out of this and stop sharing.
Dr. Weiner, thank you so much for this extraordinary talk. As a person who takes care of adults with serious illness every day, I found myself like deeply moved at many points in this talk, and reflecting on my own experiences coming into this work as a in part because of a friend who died as a child. So I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing. I want to start with a question. Oh, Elias, maybe you can help. Hopefully that.
It's the same problem that I had.
How's that? Is that better? No. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. There we go. So, can you hear me, Lori?
Yes.
Okay. I was while people formulate their questions, and please put them in the chat, and we have one from in the room. I just wanted to ask you. There's been a lot of controversy about advanced care planning in adults in North America in recent years, and I'm just curious, like with all the work that you've done, what do you think? What do you think we can learn as people who provide care for adults from the work that you've done with children? Because it's so important, all the insights. I'm curious what you think is most salient for us.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I know there is a lot of controversy about whether advanced care planning works, even if people change their minds later anyway. So why would you go through those efforts and document things? It's all about communication. And when you're working with children and adolescents and young adults and being able to talk about their preferences and knowing that their preferences may change over time and allowing them the ability to know that that's okay, but you have that conversation. You're not waiting until somebody was admitted to the ICU or is having, an acute event, or you're giving them information about a major progression of disease. It's very different. And so my experience is very different than thinking about the legalities of advanced care planning. Voicing My Choices is not a legal document. It is a communication tool. We never suggest for Voicing My Choices or any of these other tools that you start from one and you ask every single question and you get to the end. It is a way that you just model it for who people are, what they're bringing to the table, and the things that keep them up at night. That's why some of those questions are so helpful, because you just go with their lead. It's not your agenda, it's their experience.
Thank you.
We have a question.
Hold on one second. I'm trying to balance so many screens.
We have a question from Dr. Naomi Gola from the Montreal Children's Hospital on the subject of AYA participation in this research partnership. What have you learned formally or informally about how this participation factored into their meaning making or legacy?
Thank you for that question. There's so many examples that people have given me that parents have felt, or partners have felt, that what they had done in their advanced care planning has been a recipe for how to live. And so the legacy for them, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is that they are able to respect what was most important. They are to be able to make sure that that person, their child, or their partner's legacy is realized, and that they will never be forgotten. So by giving them, even for what to be able to do on the holidays, or what to be able to do with my fertility, or how to be able to use my social media account, or what to be able to do on my birthday, or can you start this organization? There's so many organizations that got started based on what the person had shared is most important, whether they put in something like Voicing My Choices or not. It is part of the advanced care planning. And that collaboration and those communications just makes it so much easier for those who are going to be living on without their loved one, to be able to make sure that their legacy is realized.
Thank you. We have another question in the Zoom. In cases where the patient is a minor and parents are adamant that they do not want to have tough end-of-life conversation in front of their child, how do you balance respecting their wishes while also getting the information to the children or the teen in age-appropriate ways?
Yeah, $6 million question, and that happens. um, and we need to respect where our family is at. We can't force to say we're going to have this conversation in front of your child. I think it's important to say we're not going to lie, to the child. But I think that respecting a parent's wishes to have a conversation outside of the room is important. So I just shared that one of the studies that found that parents had more regret later when they were forced to be able to make decisions on their own. And the same as if they're forced to be able to have a conversation. But what I do talk to parents about outside of the room is what's most important to them. And often what's most important to them is that they have the most beautiful relationship with their child and that their child trusts them. And so we do talk a lot about what would make them feel a little bit more comfortable to share in words that their child is raising, to be able to explain what's happening. And I often do share something that I learned in one of my bereavement studies, the one that I showed you with 118 parents. And a parent wrote in there, I wish I spent less time looking at clinical trials and more time with my child and talking to my child. And I shared that with them. And I said, because you work so hard to have this beautiful relationship, to do everything in the world for your child. The last thing I would want you to have is any regret that you didn't have a conversation that they may be thinking about, but not wanting to be able to talk to you about. I never want a child to die in emotional isolation from their parent, and I never want a parent to know that their child died in emotional isolation from them. So just something for you to think about. I totally respect that this is a conversation you want to just have with us right now, but just something to think about. And if it helps, just to be able to think about some of the words they're using and to build on those, and they'll let you know if they want to talk more. So I broach it that way.
Thank you. Someone says, I have an adolescent patient with a sarcoma and he is reluctant to reach out to his friends. Do you have any suggestions for me to encourage him to do so?
Really understanding why. Is it because they don't want them to know that they're sick? Is it because they don't want their friends to feel bad about them, or just to be able to know what's going on? Is it because they're angry at their friends for not coming to visit anyway, and they just feel they're being disregarded by their friends? Is it because of, they just feeling, rejected, or because they just want to just be seen as normal like everybody else, and they don't want to be focusing on an illness? So sometimes when something like that happens, I would ask them, if you don't want to reach out to your friends, it's, right now, that's something that's obviously that's your choice. But then I find them posting these things on social media and I don't want to talk about it. So there's often a disconnect there. But I would just say, if you were to talk to any of your friends, who would you want to talk to? And for each one, I would just say, if you wanted to talk, you were going to talk to Johnny, what do you think you would want Johnny to know? If you were going to talk to Sally, what would you want Sally to know? You're not going to reach out because you don't want to do that. But just in case you wanted to, what is it you would want to know? And then you find out the reason a little bit why. They may have been really hurt by one of their friends. They, again, just, didn't want to be the center of attention, or they didn't want people to know that they're sick, or because they just are tired for being the kid with sarcoma, being the kid with cancer, or they don't want them to see them the way that they're looking.
Thank you. Another person is asking, what should we do when the parents shield the children and Aya from even voicing their needs for courageous discussion?
And that is such a hard challenge. I think that if parents don't want their child to be voicing their needs in a verbal way, there are nonverbal ways to be able to do that. So I would work with child life specialists or psychologists or social workers. I would have the sand tray out. I would let them be able to express what it is that they think is going on in a nonverbal way, and through play. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, I do a lot with puppets, having a conversation with two different puppets. So they may not be comfortable being able to have that conversation. And again, we can't force that, but we can try to provide other avenues for the child to be able to express what's going on so they don't have to be alone with those thoughts or their fears or their worries or their hopes.
Thank you. I have a question myself, actually. We deal a lot in adult population with children wanted to protect their elder parents and the conspiracy of silence. And we often see that they are right, indeed, that they know their parents well, and that actually the parents is not distressed by not knowing and by not sharing. They're just, they die in peace. Have you ever encountered a situation like that?
Not very often that you'll have a teen that is not going to, want to know if they are going to be dying soon or something is going to go on, but it's possible for sure. There are some people who just don't want to talk about things and they just don't want to have all the information. Just tell me what I need to do for right now. But that doesn't mean that they're not worried. And that doesn't mean that they don't have concerns, or that doesn't mean that they don't have a way that things that they want other people to know about them. And that is very much a case for some elderly people who feel like they lived a full life. And that if they were to die today or tomorrow or in the next week or next month, they could be at peace with that. I think the difference is that a younger person isn't necessarily at peace with that. And without having some communication about what's happening, it's that falsities. It's the, being in the room and people just saying, yeah, everything is great. And recognizing that what is going on here, because that is not what I'm seeing. That's not the expression on your face. That's not what I'm experiencing, hushed tones outside of the room. It's being able to have the trust that they are being given information that they want to be able to have in that age appropriate way, in a way that is respectful for how much they want to be able to know. And even the words that this is what I know now. I don't have all those answers, but I promise you, as we learn more, I'm happy to be able to share everything. We are going to get through this together.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Wiener. This concludes the Honourable Hartland de Montarville Molson lecture, sponsored again by the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. We're so grateful for you, Dr. Wiener, and I wish you could see all of the comments coming in and the questions about how grateful people are for your extraordinary presentation. Thanks to everybody for attending. We ask you to please complete your evaluation form that you can access with the QR code and that will be sent to you by email as well.
And we look forward to seeing you again on December 10th, when Dr. Megan Doherty will be talking at the Jewish General Hospital. Thank you, everyone, and à la prochaine.